Hey, today we're gonna do a very short tip video, and this is gonna be all about the gradients. Because you've probably seen all of those nice looking designs out there and you're probably wondering, why doesn't mine look like that? Well, in many cases colors can be one of the most difficult things to do. But don't worry, I'm just gonna give you a couple of hints how to make your gradients look good. Ready? Let's go. They work the same in all of the design tools. We're not gonna be designing any apps here, so I'm just gonna make a big canvas here using the frame. And from there, I'm just gonna create a rectangle to showcase our first gradient, and the first gradient is gonna be how not to do the gradients. We're gonna go with blue because this is the most common color in apps. And then change it to linear gradient, and of course one of the edges becomes transparent, so make sure to bump up the opacity. We don't really want a transparent gradient right now. And making a hard gradient like this, when one of the colors is very dark and the other is pretty light, is one of the most difficult things to pull off. So if you want your gradients, especially when you're starting out, to look good, avoid having strong gradients like this. And this gradient is even not that bad because the hue is pretty similar and the saturation is pretty similar, only the brightness is different. But if we change the hue a little bit, you end up with like a very strong and hard and messy looking gradient. This is not what we want. It's really difficult to pull this off. So instead, select the exact same color for both sides of the gradient first. So simply just select the blue here, and of course the gradient disappears, but this is what we want. Once you have the exact same color on both sides, pick the one at the bottom, because that's the one that we want to make darker. So simply holding the shift key, decrease the brightness value. You can do it maybe 3 or 4 times, not that much. And as you can see, this gradient looks a lot more natural and a lot better. Now, if you have this formula, the only thing that you need to modify there is the hue value. So just drag the slider a little bit, and as you can see, the HSB says 227, so just enter this on both sides and you have another gradient. And this is like the simple formula for when you're starting out and you want to make a button with a gradient that looks good, then simply just modify the hue, just drag the slider, then copy the value, click on the other side and paste just the first value, leaving all of the other values as they were. Now we can repeat this process to create a lot more different colors for every possible combination, and at first avoid combining colors that are too far from each other. Your initial gradients should be simple and should be really the same color with different brightness values. And of course, in some cases, like with the green, it's a little bit too bright and in your face, and it can actually hurt your eyes on some brighter displays. So in a case like this, you can also modify the saturation value to bring it closer to 50 on both sides. That will make it a lot more subtle. And same with the pink here. If we go with 50, it's just gonna be a little bit easier on the eyes. Okay, but we only have like a couple of colorful rectangles and one ugly one, so what can we do with this now? Okay, let's make them a little bit smaller and move them to the top, and let's create some proper buttons. And don't worry about the size of the button, there's like a lot of good tutorials on buttons, and you can also get an entire chapter from my book for free that's like 20 something pages on just the buttons. So for now, we just want 2 buttons. One is gonna be the ugly gradient and the other is gonna be one of the better looking ones. So I'm just gonna copy and paste the properties onto the element and then simply modify the values until we have 2 buttons. This is the most standard top to bottom gradient, with the top color being the lighter, and the top button with the harder gradient looks a little bit retro and in that really bad way. So let's duplicate both buttons. And one thing that I also like to do is when I actually have it in context of an element, I can decrease the brightness a little bit to make it more visible. And to make the gradient look natural, I always go for diagonal gradients. Just drag the handles from one edge to the other and make sure that the darker one is closer to the bottom. But if we do the same thing with that harder gradient, as you can see, it starts to look messy and a little bit dirty, and it just simply doesn't work that well. And just to show you the difference, I'm gonna duplicate the button with the better gradient, the one at the bottom, and then just modify it into a solid color. And that's pretty much it. A much better, softer looking gradients are always gonna be best. And sometimes even a solid color button is still gonna be better than one with a very hard, tough to look at gradient. So all beginner designers should really be comfortable with gradients like this first before they start experimenting with different combinations with harder gradients or even with brutalist websites or apps. This way is a lot safer to not have your layout looking horrible. That's it. Hope you enjoyed this quick tutorial. Make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment if you actually find it useful. And of course, I'm gonna see you guys in the next one. Cheers!